single decision inside a courtroom can erase decades of pain, silence entire neighborhoods, and shake a city to its core. In April 2025, Los Angeles woke up to the kind of headline that forces you to stop and read twice. Timothy McGee, the man police once called one of the most dangerous gang leaders in the city's history, no longer carried the weight of 3 murder convictions or a death sentence. Overnight, the monster of Atwater Village was stripped of the title, condemned to die. Not because new evidence proved his innocence, not because the families of the dead forgave him, but because 16 years ago, during jury deliberations, a single juror was dismissed for daring to ask a simple human question. Why would anyone risk their life to testify against a man accused of killing witnesses? That question was enough for a judge to call him biased. The California Supreme Court later called it something else, a violation so deep that it cracked the foundation of the entire case. And just like that, McGee's death sentence collapsed. To understand why this reversal feels like a betrayal to some and a technical victory to others, you have to return to the bloodstained streets where his legend was born. The courtroom bombshell, 2025 reversal. In April 2025, California's highest court dropped a decision that sent shockwaves across Los Angeles. Timothy McGee, once one of the most feared men in Atwater Village, no longer carried a death sentence. 3 murder convictions, gone. A penalty meant to end his life, erased. But here's the shocking part. This ruling didn't come from new DNA evidence or a surprise witness stepping forward. It wasn't because the court believed he was innocent. It all came down to a single moment in the courtroom 16 years earlier. Back in 2007, during jury deliberations, one juror raised a question many people were quietly thinking. Why would gang members risk their lives to testify against a man accused of killing witnesses? For asking that, the judge dismissed him. At the time, it looked like a simple decision, but in 2025, the Supreme Court declared it a violation of McGee's right to a fair trial. The entire case was thrown into question. Victims' families were devastated. Prosecutors were furious, and the public was left wondering how one juror's removal could undo decades of justice. To understand why this decision hit so hard, we need to go back to where McGee's story began. The man called Huero an Eskimo. Timothy Joseph McGee didn't look like the typical gang leader. Born in 1973 to a Scottish-American father and Mexican-American mother, his pale skin earned him the nickname Huero, Spanish for light-skinned. On the street, some called him Eskimo because of his mixed background. As a kid, neighbors remembered him skateboarding around Atwater Village, a working-class neighborhood in northeast Los Angeles. Some saw him as just another local boy, someone who rapped, someone you might nod to at the corner store. But others noticed something different, a connection with the Tunaville Reefer 13 gang, known as TVR 13. By his teenage years, he was already tied to the gang, putting in work to earn respect. At first glance, McGee didn't fit the image of a ruthless killer. But appearances in the gang world don't mean much. What matters is reputation, loyalty, and fear. And McGee would go on to build all 3 in terrifying ways. The boy with the skateboarder grew into a man who made entire neighborhoods go silent. His story is proof that even someone who looks ordinary can rise into extraordinary power when violence becomes the language of respect. Rise of a shot caller. McGee's real transformation began in prison. In 1993, at just 20 years old, he was sent away for assaulting a police officer. He served 4 years. Prison is where gangs test loyalty, shape leaders, and set the stage for who runs the streets. By the time McGee walked out in 1997, he wasn't just another member of Toonerville Reefer. He came out determined, organized, and ruthless. Witnesses later described him as completely changed. He didn't just want to be part of the gang, he wanted to run it. And soon he did. McGee built TVR 13 into one of the most feared sets in Los Angeles. He demanded loyalty and punished anyone who showed weakness. He gave out green lights, gang slang for permission to kill, like party invitations. Rivals who crossed into TVR territory often didn't live to regret it. Members who failed him were checked, sometimes fatally. McGee's control was absolute, and it was based on fear. Unlike many leaders who give orders from behind bars, McGee stayed active on the streets, leading attacks himself. His reputation grew fast. By the late 1990s, Timothy McGee wasn't just a member of Toonerville Reefer. He was its shot caller, the man everyone feared. Murder as a message. For McGee, violence wasn't only about eliminating enemies, it was about sending messages. Every bullet carried meaning. Every body left behind was a warning to others. In 1997, Ronald Martin, a member of a rival gang, was shot multiple times after crossing into TVR territory. The shooting wasn't random, it was a statement. That same year, Pedro Sanchez and Juan Cardiel were attacked. Sanchez survived. Cardiel lived, but was paralyzed. These weren't just crimes. They were advertisements of what happened when you crossed Timothy McGee. In July 2000, he allegedly shot at 2 LAPD officers on Independence Day. That was more than an attack. It was a challenge to the police themselves, showing that TVR wouldn't back down. In 2001, 16-year-old Ryan Gonzalez was killed in broad daylight. Later that year, Marjorie Mendoza was murdered in her car. Each of these killings sent fear rippling through the community. For McGee, fear was currency. It kept rivals away, silenced witnesses, and built his myth. He didn't need to kill everyone. He only needed to kill enough people to make everyone else afraid of speaking his name. Christina Duran, the witness who knew too much. One of the darkest turns in McGee's story came with the death of Christina Duran. On November 9th, 2001, just hours after Marjorie Mendoza was murdered, Duran sat in an interrogation room with LAPD detective Jose Carrillo. She gave a videotaped statement naming McGee as the shooter. She was scared, but she spoke anyway. She believed the police could protect her. But within weeks, Christina Duran was dead. Everyone knew who was responsible, but McGee was never charged. Her murder sent a message louder than any threat. Talk to the police and you die. After that, the community went silent. People who had seen shootings suddenly forgot details. Witnesses who once gave statements recanted. Neighbors looked the other way when violence happened in broad daylight. Duran's death wasn't just another murder. It was the end of trust between the community and the justice system. Even years later, detectives would say that after Christina died, Northeast Los Angeles went mute. Her bravery exposed the limits of police protection, and her murder proved McGee's reach was bigger than anyone wanted to believe. It was the moment he became not just a killer, but a legend of fear. The manhunt across LA and beyond. By late 2001, McGee had become too dangerous to leave on the streets. The LAPD, FBI, and U.S. Marshals formed a multi-agency task force to hunt him down. His face was plastered on wanted posters in newspapers. Rewards were offered. He was placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. But in Atwater Village, nobody talked. Everyone had seen what happened to Christina Duran. Nobody wanted to be next. McGee didn't flee to Mexico or hide in some distant state. Instead, he stayed local for months, hiding in plain sight. He moved between safe houses, crashing with gang members and girlfriends who thought dating a killer was exciting. Detectives described showing up at parties in Glasso Park, hearing he had been there minutes earlier. Bullhead City, Arizona. A customer at a convenience store recognized McGee from a newspaper photo. He called 911. Police tracked McGee to his construction job and waited. On February 24th, they boxed him in at a McDonald's. He raised his hand, smiled, and said, "You got me." No shootout, no chase, just a calm surrender that shocked everyone. The trial that terrified a city. When McGee's trial began in 2007, the courthouse looked more like a fortress than a courtroom. Armed deputies stood guard. Jurors entered through secret doors. Their names were sealed. Bulletproof glass separated the public from the proceedings. Pedro Sanchez, who had survived McGee's gunfire in 1997, took the stand, but suddenly claimed he couldn't remember faces. Everyone knew he was scared. Then came the haunting testimony of Christina Duran, shown through videotape, speaking from beyond the grave. She named McGee as Mendoza's killer hours before her own murder. Jurors watch, silent. Former gang members described McGee's rule, calling him ruthless, saying he laughed after killing a 16-year-old. Prosecutors presented ballistics evidence, tying the same gun to multiple shootings. McGee's handwritten rap lyrics were read aloud, verses that seemed to confess to real murders. The defense argued it was all fiction, but the fear in the courtroom was real. Even the toughest witnesses trembled when they said McGee's name. Lyrics that read like confessions. One of the most controversial pieces of evidence against McGee came from his own words. When police searched his home, they found notebooks filled with rap lyrics. At first glance, they looked like typical gangster rap. Violent imagery, threats, and street life rhymes. But prosecutors noticed something chilling. The lyrics weren't just violent stories. They matched real crimes. One verse threatened witnesses, another promised violence against rival gangs. Most damning of all, one lyric mentioned the deaths of Mendoza and Duran before they actually happened. Prosecutors argued this was no coincidence. These weren't just lyrics, they were confessions written in rhyme. The defense fought back. They said rap lyrics are art, a form of self-expression protected by the First Amendment. After all, countless rappers write about violence without committing crimes. But the jurors saw it differently. When the words on the page lined up with real murders, the line between fiction and confession blurred. One juror later said that when McGee wrote about Mendoza dying before she was killed, it stopped feeling like music and started feeling like proof. In the end, the lyrics didn't just entertain, they helped convict him. Death row and violence behind bars. In 2009, McGee was sentenced to death. He became prisoner case 75491 on San Quentin's death row. For most inmates, life there is a routine of isolation. 23 hours in a cell, 1 hour alone in a cage. But McGee was different. He refused to fade into prison life. In 2012, he made an improvised weapon and attacked 2 corrections officers. They survived, but the attack earned him another life sentence. Even behind bars, he was still dangerous. Authorities suspected him of organizing gang activity through coded letters and whispered conversations in visiting rooms. Contraband phones linked him to suspected assault orders in 2020 and prison gang plans in 2023. Concrete walls and steel bars could contain his body, but not his influence. For his 8 children, growing up meant visiting their father through glass. For the victims' families, knowing he was still violent, even in prison, was a constant reminder that the nightmare wasn't over. McGee's myth continued to grow. To some, he became a symbol of fear that even the prison system couldn't control. To others, he was proof that evil doesn't stop just because someone is locked up. The juror who changed everything. The case against McGee looked airtight, until one detail from 2007 came back to haunt it. During jury deliberations, juror number 5 questioned why witnesses would risk their lives to testify against someone like McGee. It was a reasonable question, given his reputation, but the judge called it bias and dismissed the juror. The trial continued without him, and McGee was convicted. Years later, McGee's lawyers argued this dismissal violated his 6th Amendment right to a unanimous jury. Appeals, courts upheld the conviction, but the California Supreme Court saw it differently. In April 2025, Justice Goodwin Liu wrote the unanimous opinion. The juror hadn't refused to deliberate. He had asked legitimate questions about witness credibility. Removing him undermined the entire verdict. With those words, McGee's convictions and death sentence were overturned. The families of victims were crushed. Prosecutors faced the impossible task of retrying a 20-year-old case with most witnesses dead, missing, or too scared to speak. The irony was brutal. The very fear McGee created, the fear that made witnesses hesitate, was the same reason his convictions collapsed decades later. In the end, one juror's voice silenced 3 murder convictions. Legacy of fear and silence. Timothy McGee's story is more than one man's crimes. It's about the lasting impact of fear. In Atwater Village, his name is still spoken in whispers, like a curse you don't want to wake. Parents remember not letting their kids walk outside. Survivors carry scars. Families carry grief. Psychologists later found PTSD rates in the neighborhood that matched war zones. Witnesses who once spoke out either fled, recanted, or lived with regret. Christina Duran's murder revealed the cracks in witness protection, leading to stronger protocols across the country. McGee may have beaten the death penalty, but he didn't beat the cage. He remains in prison for other violent acts, unlikely to ever walk free. His gang fractured. His neighborhood moved on. Coffee shops and new homes cover the old crime scenes. Yet his shadow lingers. Young gang members still swear by his name, invoking him like a legend. Timothy McGee will die behind bars, but his story lives as a warning of how fear can outlast justice. Timothy McGee's story shows how fear can shape entire communities, silence voices, and even change the course of justice years later. From his rise in Atwater Village to the shocking Supreme Court reversal in 2025, this case is a reminder of how fragile justice can be and how its impact lingers long after the verdict. Thank you for watching. If you found this helpful, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe for more valuable insights into stories that shape our world. Stay curious, because more powerful and eye-opening stories are on the way.